just as you are to worship. Come, just as you are before your God. Come. One day every tongue will confess you are God. One day every knee will bow. Still the greatest treasure remains for those who gladly choose you now.
surprised I haven't written the class material yet. Yeah, nobody's real all that surprised. Thank you. Thank you. Someone was surprised. So when you see Marisa, just apologize to her for me. Yep, I'm trying. So I got a wonderful little sticky note up here that says, remind everybody that there are a few more of these in the foyer. I argue with his phrase of a few because there's like a few hundred maybe. But they are still in the foyer. VBS starts next week. Hopefully everybody's ready, and if you're not, well, it's too late. Yes, starts on Sunday. I just run the booth. I mean, that's all I know. All right, let's go ahead and have a prayer. You guys will pray with me. Father, we humble ourselves before you. We are grateful for the week that you have provided to us. We are grateful for the safety that we've enjoyed and the blessings we've had. As we delve into the final chapter of the book of Ezra this evening, and we are studying the lengths that the Jews had to go in order to be righteous, in order to be pure in your eyes, we hope that we will learn the lesson of the past and strive to be righteous before you now. This is our prayer in your Son's name. Amen. All right, Ezra chapter 10. All right, so my goal is finish Ezra. If we have time, I've got more stuff I'm going to talk about. But that is the number one goal, because it's not like I'm not going to be here in 2 weeks and just continue it. But we're going to finish Ezra this evening. So Ezra has come. Ezra has arrived in Jerusalem. I wanted to say Persia and Babylon. I'm like, no, he left all those places. He's arrived in Jerusalem. He's been there a little while. After a few months, he is informed that the people have done what sin? They married the people of the land. Not only did they marry the people of the land, but they married people of the land who worship what? Idols. So that is the issue that we have at hand. It's the same issue we had when they were building the temple back in, I don't remember, chapter 4? Yes, beginning of chapter 4. Zerubbabel arrived in Jerusalem area. He's supposed to build the temple. He wants to start working on it. Some of the people who already lived there came and said, let us build with you, because we also worship the same God. And we had a lot of comments on the fact that no, point of fact they don't. The God that they worship is the God of the sin of Jeroboam, and so they had to separate themselves. Now, here in chapter 10, our primary issue is that we have people who have come from exile. It's not been all that long, 150 odd years, and they are committing the same sin that the people of Israel committed when they first came to Canaan and continued to commit all the way up until the exile. And now Ezra is hoping to purge it so it doesn't happen again. Spoiler alert, Nehemiah says it does. But that's his goal. So in chapter 9, we looked at the prayer of Ezra. I'll go back to chapter 9 here, where he outlines what the issue is, and then he goes through his prayer telling the history of the people, and then pairs their return from Babylon with their return out of Egypt. And says we are doing the same, it's the same commands, we are making the same mistakes, we have to fix it now. So, Ezra chapter 10. We start reading in verse 1. While Ezra prayed and made confession, weeping and casting himself down before the house of God, a very great assembly of men, women, and children gathered to him out of Israel, for the people wept bitterly. And Shechaniah, the son of Jehiel, of the sons of Elam, addressed Ezra. And he said, we have broken faith with our God and have married foreign women from the peoples of the land. And even now, there is hope for Israel in spite of this. Therefore, let us make a covenant with our God to put away all these wives and their children according to the counsel of my Lord and of those who tremble at the commandment of our God, and let it be done according to the law. Arise, for it is your task, and we are with you. Be strong and do it." And Ezra arose and made the leading priests and Levites and all Israel take an oath that they would do as had been said. So they took the oath. And we'll stop there. Okay, so we start up here with what I'm characterizing as the admission of guilt. Ezra has done his weeping, Ezra has done his pray teaching, and now we see the result of this. While he is doing his pray teaching, which is the justification, by the way, for lengthy prayers in the middle of service where it seems like they're preaching to us, see Ezra. That's exactly what he did. He's not really talking to God, by the way. Just pay attention to all of chapter 9. He finishes this. Shechaniah stands forth. And Shechaniah of the sons of Elam, the son of Jehiel, and he says, "We have done wrong. This is our proposal of how to fix it." Now, I think it's incredibly important that Ezra is not the originator of this idea. Nehemiah is going to take a very different stance. Nehemiah is the originator of every idea. He is the powerhouse, the bulldozer that destroys anything in his path. Ezra is not. Ezra is portrayed as much more passive, I think is the word I want to use. He allows others to take the lead. He is more than willing to punish himself, to tear out his own beard. Nehemiah is willing to tear out his friends' beards. So we can look at the difference between these two guys. Shechaniah begins to speak. "We have broken faith with our God. We have married the foreign women, but now there is hope." Now, all of this quarter, we've been talking about there is a shift that is happening. Before they go to exile, the people are polytheistic. Now, as a nation, perhaps we might say they're monotheistic. But if you looked at any person and you just plucked them out of the middle of nowhere, you're more than likely going to find a polytheistic Jew. They believe in multiple gods. They're more than willing to accept that another god is involved. They're constantly struggling with following after other gods. The whole time, this is the issue. Ezra anchors it all the way back in Deuteronomy, as we talked last week, that they did not keep themselves from marrying those that worship other gods. We're not going to make the same mistake. After exile, they are trying to be monotheistic in a way that they've never really done before. Even reading the Jewish scholars that read through their own history, this is a point that they make, that there was a huge shift when they came back from exile. And it seems as though, to paraphrase one of their scholars I was reading today, it seems as though there was almost no difficulty with staying monotheistic after exile. Well, there's a reason for this. The reason is probably Ezra and Nehemiah. And then some of the Tanaheim and so forth that we've been discussing for the last couple of weeks. Okay. So Shechaniah comes up with an idea. He says, we're going to make a covenant. We're going to put away the wives. We're going to put away the children according to the counsel of my Lord and those that are trembling at the command of our God. Let it be done according to the law. Arise, for it is your task, and we are with you. What does it mean according to the law? Anybody want to guess? Okay. So in the first place, there's an issue. So if we're going to put them away according to the law, Jesus deals with this. What does Moses command? You write a bill of divorce. Let's go and read that. Deuteronomy 24. Keep yourself here at Ezra 10, but we're going over there to Deuteronomy 24. So, this is one section talking about the divorce. We're not going to read all of the chapter because he doesn't stay on it for very long. We're going to look at the first 4 verses, and I want you to notice when it talks about the bill of divorce, a certificate of divorce, whatever yours happens to say, why is it there? That's what I want us to pay attention to. When a man takes a wife, chapter 24 of Deuteronomy, verse 1, and marries her, If then she finds no favor in his eyes because he has found some indecency in her, and he writes her a certificate of divorce and puts it in her hand and sends her out of his house, and she departs out of his house, and if she goes and becomes another man's wife, and the latter man hates her and writes her a certificate of divorce and puts it in her hand and sends her out of his house, or if the latter man dies and who took her to be his wife, then her former husband who sent her away may not take her again to be his wife after she has been defiled, for that is an abomination before the Lord. And you shall not bring sin upon the land that the Lord your God is giving you for inheritance. Okay, what are the reasons that this bill of divorce has to be here? What do you guys think? Or what did it say? Clay?
It protects the woman from accusations of wrongdoing.
Oh, yeah. It also protects her from being frequently kicked out of her home. So a man can't just say, you burned dinner, I'm going to divorce you for a week or two, and then I'm going to take you back. Like, that's not a life. He has to make a decision, and the decision has long-lasting consequences as a result. What else? Yeah, she could go get married again. The bill of divorce means that she cannot go back to the original guy, but she can move forward. Okay, what else? Yeah.
It legitimizes it to the entire community. That this is not just, sure, I divorced her. Yeah. He has to make a decision and he has to own it publicly.
Yes, there is documentation of this. More than likely, once they're in the land, this is before elders. This may have happened at the gate. This may happen before a judge who has been appointed over their city. This may happen before royal individuals once we get into the point of the kings. But the point is, there is not just her name, his name, all signatures are here, all symbols are here, and probably, to use our own terminology, notarized. Everybody knows. Yeah.
Jesus says about this in Matthew 19, it's because of the hardness of your heart that I think we actually begin to see what this document, this certificate, this whole procedure was actually a method of protection.
On both sides. This is an event that has to be taken incredibly serious. Now, post-exile, the way that the Jews are going to... Oh, yeah, go ahead.
One other form of divorce in the law of Moses, and it's in Deuteronomy chapter 21. And it may be the only one that even halfway applies to the situation in Ezra 10, because it's all about marrying foreign women who are not Israelites. And it's Deuteronomy 21, verses 10 through 14. And it's about taking a captive from your enemies in a time of war.
Yeah.
So if you've attacked a city, you see this woman, she's beautiful, and you're like, you know what, I don't want you to suffer. I'd like for you to come be my wife. Well, if you do not delight in her, verse 14, you're supposed to send her away. You cannot treat her like a slave. You must treat her with dignity and respect and send her away, not sell her or profit off of this. And this is the only place, let me say it this way, this is the only place I can think of in the law of Moses where it actually talks about how to go about marrying one of these foreign women that you are forbidden from marrying.
Yeah.
And I think it goes back to what you pointed out last week in chapter 9, I think verse 1 and verse 2, that it's really not so much about marrying a foreign woman, but their idolatrous influence.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I like the end of that verse, verse 14, because you humiliated her. That's the way the ESV says. It's, again, punishment to the man as well. Okay, let's go back to Ezra. So these are the things that they have in mind when they say according to the law. They're not just willy-nilly doing things, but again, Ezra's trying to bring them back to according to the law. Okay, any thoughts before we get into verse 6? Cool. Okay. Ezra leaves, and he goes from before the house of God. He goes into the chamber of Jehohanan, the son of Elishib, where he spends the night, neither eating nor drinking, and was mourning over the faithlessness of the exiles. A proclamation was made throughout Judah and Jerusalem to all of the returned exiles that they should assemble at Jerusalem. If anyone did not come within 3 days, by order of the officials and the elders, all of his property should be forfeited, and he himself banned from the congregation of the exiles. It's pretty strict, so they're taking it seriously. So Ezra leaves. He goes from before the house of God into the chamber of Jehohanan. Jehohanan is ultimately going to become high priest. We're looking at about 457. He does not become high priest till 410. So we're talking about a long time down the road. He's a very old man when he becomes high priest. But we got that in the record. We have it in the record from the Elephantine papyri. Again, why is Elephantine important? What country is it in? Egypt. A whole bunch of Jews went down there to Egypt, and they built what there? A temple. So that's why it's important. Okay, so we've got that record involved. The whole proclamation has gone out. 3 days, everybody needs to assemble. Any comments before we get into verse 9 and start talking about some of the real good meat? Cool. Then all of the men of Judah and Benjamin assembled at Jerusalem within the 3 days, which is impressive, right? Remember, this is a book that is outlining for us how the Jews returned home and how they reestablished righteousness. And all the men of Judah and Benjamin assembled at Jerusalem within 3 days. Whether they just wanted to make sure their property wasn't seized, or whether because they were curious about what the righteous discussion was going to be, you guys can decide. But the conclusion seems to be that they're very concerned about what's going to be discussed. It was the 9th month, on the 20th day of the month, which is in December for us, and all of the people sat in the open square before the house of God, trembling because of this matter and because of the heavy rain. I love that detail. Scholars use it to say this is, again, really important details to let us know it was probably a first-hand account. But isn't that so theatrical for us? When you're watching a movie and it's downpouring and the characters are standing in the rain, you know this is important. Probably most of us didn't know that they just stole it from the book of Ezra. But this is very important. It's so important that they refuse to remain under coverings, but they have gathered themselves together in the open square that is before the temple and are listening. Ezra the priest stands up and he says, "You have broken faith and married foreign women, and so increased the guilt of Israel." I love that word. Any of your other translations use a different word than increased? Added? They are already guilty. This is such a Christian concept that is novel to the post-exile Jews. They don't think this way beforehand. They think that they cannot be defeated. They are righteous because all of their stuff is good, and there is the temple, and we're going to be fine. And they go back to that way of thinking during the time of Christ. But for somebody to say, I am currently right in the eyes of God and still bearing guilt, is a Christian thought, because that points to grace and it points to mercy, which is not something that pre-exile Jews really seem to understand. If you need more information about that, read the Minor Prophets, because they deal with that quite a bit. Okay, so he goes on. "Now then, make confession to the Lord, the God of your fathers, and do his will. Separate yourselves from the people of the land and from the foreign wives." So Ezra puts it out really simple. You've sinned, you're making everything worse, so put them away, which is Bible speak for divorce. But the assembly responds with a loud voice, "It is so." Probably that's the part the whole assembly said, yes. And then some people started talking and they're like, well, we've got to do what you say, but there's a lot of us and it's raining and we can't stand in the open for all of this. So this is not a task that can just be done in a day or two, for we've greatly transgressed in this matter. Let our officials stand for the whole assembly. Let all in our cities who have taken foreign wives come at appointed times, and with them the elders and the judges of every city, until the fierce wrath of our God over this matter is turned away from us. And we'll stop there for just a moment. So, we can't do this all at once. There is an unwritten assumption that they have that you and I need to talk about. How hard is it to know if someone is a Jew or not? I mean, let's just think about it practically. Are you going to be surprised? Anybody going to walk up before the judges and I thought she was a Jew. I thought she was of my people. This is brand new information. Nobody's going to be surprised. But they say it's going to take some time. So the assumption is this is not as simple as who are your parents. It can't be that simple. Because if it is that simple, I guarantee you they could have finished it in a day. It doesn't take any work. Your parents are not from the Jews. Bye. End of discussion. Every man could have taken care of it at his own house, could have finished it up, go by the next morning, finalize the bill of divorce, done. 2 days tops, right? So there has to be more to this than just, are they a descendant of Abraham or not? Even that may not be sufficient. So, that is assumption number one that we need to make sure we have in our head. This is why the assembly says this is going to take some time. We got to work through this. So they put forth the idea that we're going to establish people who are going to handle this. They're going to go to the cities. They're going to look through the marriage records. They're going to talk to the people. They're going to make an assessment. Is this a marriage that needs to be dissolved or not? Any comments or thoughts before we go a little further? Because I stopped one verse before the end of this little paragraph.
Well, there's a lot to this. Number one, there's families, there's children. They've got to decide, okay, the divorce, yes, I understand God wants that. She can't make a living. That was pretty much the situation they're looking at. These women are not going to be able to make a living.
Yep.
How are they going to take care of their children? So there's a lot. I mean, it's going to take 3 months. So what do they do? It takes 3 months.
Yes.
You've got a lot to think about.
There's a lot of considerations. I got a hand over here. Yep. There is a rule of thumb that the Jews establish after exile, and that is, who is your mom? That is the rule of thumb they establish. Who your dad is less important. The father tends to be where the authority line comes from. So, for example, we're looking at the hierarchy of who gets to be king. Father is important. But when proving what nation do you belong to, what culture do you belong to, there is only one person that can prove with 100% certainty that they are the parent. And that's mom. That's it. So their rule of thumb from around this time forward is, who is your mother? Notice this discussion is not, the sons have gone, or we took our daughters and married them to their sons. That's not the discussion. The discussion is, our authority is here with the fathers, but we cannot prove their lineage because of the mothers. That's the argument that they make. So, Egypt does exactly the same thing. There's a reason that pharaohs married their sisters from around the time of Greece onward. Because you want to prove your lineage? Women can, men can't. Not till 1960s. I think that's around the time we started being able to prove. Any other thoughts? Yes?
So I'm reading out of the King James, but it says strange wives instead of foreign wives, which is quite a bit different. So when I think of strange, I might not think of someone outside of physically, but when I think of that would be strange mentally or different,
Yeah. So the word strange, because you said you're reading it out of the King James, right? The word strange would have meant foreign or different during that time period when that English word was used. It modified over the years. Yeah, stranger, foreigner, we're in a strange land. It's the same idea. It's just not my home. It's not who I am. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Yes.
I would like to think that they were giving their wives an option, because there is precedent with Rahab and Ruth of foreign women becoming part of the Jewish system. So if they were willing to put away their foreign gods and become, true God worshipers,
Yep.
them and their children can stay, and then it wouldn't even be an issue.
Welcome to the issue of the assumption we just made, right? This is not as cut and dry as who are your parents. Now, we talked about this last week in chapter 9. Ezra is incredibly specific whenever he talks about the problem. He says that they have married foreign women and their idols. Almost every time in chapter 9 when he discusses the issue, even all the way back at the beginning of chapter 9, when the issue is presented to him, the issue comes down that we have mixed with the foreign people and their idols. Which begs the question then, why do you need a judge to determine if this is a lawful marriage? And this is a marriage that should continue. It's because some of them are Jews now. Potentially. I know if you look all the way back with like Jacob and Rachel and Leah, she certainly had some idols that she was taking with her. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Yes.
Had to go with the mothers when they
Yes.
got rid of it.
Yes. We're going to talk a little bit about that a little later. There are some scholars who believe that all of the issue marriages, the ones where they intermarried, are post-Ezra arriving. I think this is a garbage answer, but it is an answer that means there's not a lot of kids. You're going to have a lot of pregnant women at most. Maybe a baby, because we're not talking about a whole lot of time from Ezra arriving to Ezra doing all of this stuff. A handful of months at most, and even that is adding in a little bit. So some scholars will take that one. I think that the reason they take that stance is because they don't like the idea of sending away the children. That's their problem. You're going to read a lot when you read online of people saying that they have done a death sentence to the women and to the children because they have kicked them out and women and children cannot provide for themselves. Well, they could. I mean, one, the law says you cannot reap the corners of your field so that foreigners and the poor can come and eat. So, one, Ruth did not starve. When you come to that foreign land that is the Jews, you still can eat. But two, the vast majority of them would have gone back to their father's house. All right, any other thoughts before I go on even further? I got several, I think. Lauren was first and then Blaine. Because I really passed over hers.
Do you think part of the delay was just because this is hard?
I think so.
In my mind, this has always been like, oh, these terrible foreign women, but these are marriages. They've been together for a while. They've got kids together, and they're doing the right thing. But that doesn't mean it's not hard.
Yeah.
And I think taking some time to say, okay, this is a kick in the teeth, but this is what we have to do.
Yeah.
I would want time.
I agree with you. I don't think it was an easy decision. I would not have wanted to be the individuals chosen to make that final call either. But yeah, I'm going to have some more comments on that in a minute, but it's definitely coming. Blaine.
Just listening to all of this, it seems like it's a failure of household leadership on the part of the Jewish men.
Yeah.
I mean, Solomon was led away by his foreign wives. These men are being led away by their. That's not the way God set up the household.
Yep.
And so it's failing. It's causing problems.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right.
And there's massive consequences to that, which we see in our society today.
Yeah. I mean, if you just want to take a microcosm of three individuals, Saul, David, Solomon, Saul's household has idols in it, and as far as we can tell, he only marries Jews. David's household, he marries foreigners and Jews. There are no idols in his household. Solomon marries both, and he falls away. Idols are everywhere. Yeah.
This is Timothy.
Yep.
His mother's married to a Greek. Greek father exercised control, would not allow his son to be circumcised, become part of the covenant people.
Yep.
But mother and grandmother teach the way.
And once he is circumcised, how do the Jewish people treat him? He's a Jew. It could not have happened the other way. You could not have simply circumcised him and said, this is a Jewish man with a Greek woman. You could not have simply circumcised him. He would have had to have proselytized, which is a full process. But he could, because who's his mom? Yep.
I think that's why it may have taken so long, some folks may have converted.
I'm sorry, say that again?
You think that's why they may have given so much time to give time for people to learn and maybe change?
Yeah, I mean, in a moment we're going to look at the list, and we're going to have some comments on that. But I think you're asking the question we need to be asking. Yes.
If you go back to that Deuteronomy 21 section I brought up, it tells you how a foreign woman becomes part of the Jewish community. She has to cut her fingernails, she has to change her clothes, she has to incorporate herself into that community. I recognize it's in time of war, but
And she has to lament
she has to lament
because they're dead.
because they're dead.
Yes, her parents are dead. Whether they are or not, she laments her culture is dead. She is now of anew. Because there is no circumcision for women under the Jewish law. Cool. All right, let's read that one verse that I left out. Verse 15, only Jonathan, the son of Asahel, and Josiah, the son of Tikvah, opposed this, and Meshullam and Shabbatai, the Levite, supported them. The question before us, what did they oppose? Because in English it says this, and in Hebrew it's not any clearer. So what do you guys think? What are our options for what they could oppose? Yep, oppose the whole idea. I don't think we need to. They could oppose the amount of time involved. They could have opposed the process and been okay with the time, but I don't like the process. We're not told. So let's run through the consequences of all of the decisions. Let's say these individuals opposed the idea itself. What would that tell us about the Jews in Jerusalem here? They're not willing to give it up to follow God. I like the way you put that. A lot of people will cling to their family rather than follow God. During my preaching years, I talked to several individuals who said, well, my grandparents went here. It was good enough for them. It's good enough for me. Paraphrasing slightly. This is similar. I picked my family. What else? Think of the consequence of opposing the idea itself that we need to put away the foreigners.
The power from Artaxerxes to put anybody to death who does not obey the Torah.
Yeah. Yeah, Ezra is not somebody to mess with. He has been given all authority to do whatever he feels like. Okay. What if they are opposing the time limit? What does that teach us?
Just like, well, we can knock this out in a day, or if they wanted more.
Okay. Could go either way. I don't tend to side on the more time, just by the way it's worded, by opposed this. I feel like they would have said we wanted longer. But opposed, I don't like that word. They're against something without offering an alternative. We have no alternative recorded. They don't like the time limit. What else? What do you guys think?
If they were opposed goes to the measure of grace that was being shown to this situation. So if we can use a derogatory term, they're hardliners.
Yep. Which is very Ezra, very Nehemiah. Hard line. This is the law. I'm going to hit you if you don't do it. That's very Nehemiah. We're going to have a great time next quarter. It's almost cruel if they wanted immediate. There is no allowance for any variability. That is literally, who are your parents? Nope, don't qualify. Kick them out. I find it interesting that Jonathan, Asahel, Josiah, Tikvah, Meshullam, Shabbathai are not included in the list of those who put away their wives. Now, there is a Meshullam down in verse 29, which is possible, but Meshullam is identified as a Levite, and in verse 29, that is not the group of Levites, that's just the group of Israelites. The Levites were up in verse 23, and he's not included there. So I take the stance that that's a different guy. If you don't believe me, go back and read all the El Nathans. Or just look through this section and count how many times these names are repeating. Messiah is in there, I don't know how many times when I was counting through this. I think Mattaniah is in there a couple of times. There's just several repeating names. I can see Messiah in verse 21 and verse 30, and all I'm doing is glancing through. So repeating names is not necessarily a great argument, but it does mean names are common. So none of these individuals are included in this list of those that had to put away their spouse. What might that teach us? They had the wives that went with them. That's one possibility. What's another one? Their wives weren't pagan. So, I oppose this because I don't think we should put away our wife. They're not included in the list. They might be married to foreign women who are worshiping other idols. So, on the other side, my wife is of utmost purity. Kick them out now could be a hardliner. I'm opposed to waiting 3 months. We need to settle this now and in the rain. Could go either way. Excessive righteousness, excessive unrighteousness. We've got both options there. So again, we're not really coming up with a great answer, are we? No conclusion.
Married, and so they don't care about wives or children.
That is a good argument. Yeah, that's a good third variable. They don't care. And they can still fall on either side of that argument of pagan side or excessive righteousness side. Lauren?
I think, though, that the common element in those goes back to they want to be God. They want to make the decision. They think that their assessment of the situation is more important than following Torah.
Yeah. So there is one person in chapter 10 whose name appears in the list, who is already featured in our discussion. And it's up there in verse 26. I put it on the board for you guys. Who's the name? Zechariah? Is Zechariah named in chapter 10 before this? Compare verse 2 with verse 26. Elam, yep, Elam's there. And starts with a J. Yeah, Jehiel is how I say it, but you can say it any way you want because we're Americans. And I'm probably not saying it right either. So Shechaniah, son of Jehiel, of the sons of Elam, verse 26, of the sons of Elam, Jehiel. Now, I made the argument with Meshullam that that's probably not the same Meshullam in verse 15 and in verse 29. I think that argument holds water. That's why I say it. But verse 2 and verse 26, the argument is those are the same names. Jehiel, father of the one who stood up and said we need to put away the foreign wives, married a foreign wife. So we're having a discussion here about family and about righteousness. And on the one hand, we started settling in verse 15 on a group of people who are not valuing family correctly. Either they value it so highly that they're willing to be unrighteous, or they value it so little that they don't want to look around and decide, is this actually a marriage that needs to dissolve? But then there's Shechaniah, who says, my father is a sinner, adding to the guilt of the nation. And then his father repents as a result. What are your thoughts?
And he would have kicked his own butt out.
Welcome to the discussion. I think that you can take that side and say, we're not looking at a new event. It could be happening a long time for Shechaniah to get into the position he is. And there is a difference between mother and child and mother and offspring. So he's old enough to have chosen to become Jewish, to behave Jewishly, and put away foreign idols. It's also an argument that can be made. But I find it really fascinating that here at the end, we have two sets of people. One set opposes the matter for some reason, and none of their names are mentioned. And one set says we need to put them away, and his dad is mentioned. Any thoughts anybody has? Any comments before we go a little further?
Is it understood what happens to you if you put away your wife, foreign wife?
I don't think we fully said it. Do you want to say it? It is the death penalty. And we're going to argue that here in just a minute. It's either death or run away. You could run away and go to a foreign land and no longer be a part of the Jews. That is an option. But according to the law, it would be death penalty. Because what you have is a house with idols. The law of Moses does not look kindly on a house with idols, where the man approves of that idolatry. Last year, I think when in my discussion with Anana, and we looked in those passages in Isaiah and Jeremiah, where it talks about the women making the bread and the children singing the songs and the husband approving of the action of the worship of the Queen of Heaven, Inanna, or Asherah, if you want to take that route. I'm okay with either one. Okay, any thoughts before we go to verse 16?
After 3 wives, or was this one husband and one wife?
So, what was the question?
Did they have multiple wives? Did they have a Jewish wife and a foreign wife? Or did...
It's possible. It's not fully prohibited. We don't really get a lot of that post-exile, even going so far that by the time that we get up to the time of Christ, you don't really see it hardly at all, multiple wives. So, it's possible. It's a law mark confusion. Okay, verse 16. Because remember, you guys remember at the beginning I said, what is my number one goal for tonight? Finish Ezra. And I'm almost out of time. Okay. Then the returned exiles did so. Ezra the priest selected men, heads of the fathers' houses, according to their fathers' houses, each of them designated by name. On the first day of the 10th month, they sat down to examine the matter. By the end of the first day, or by the first day of the first month, they had come to the end of all of the men who had married foreign women. So, heads of the fathers' houses, there's between 75 and 90, I believe, mentioned earlier in Ezra. So let's assume that's our number. From verse 18 through the end of the chapter, there's a little over 100 individual names with a couple of arguments. So we've got a little bit more than one per head of house. It's estimated there's about 30,000 Jews in Judah at this point. Half of them are, well, let's run through the numbers. We'll say everybody's married and everybody's got 2 kids and all of that, blah, 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 blah. We're still looking at between, 3,000 to 5,000 women. Of those 3,000 to 5,000 women, 100-ish men are married to foreign wives. This is not the entire nation. That's the argument we're making from math. And I don't like math, so please don't make me do it again. This is not an epidemic where every single Jew has done this. But at the same time, let's go the other direction. Yes?
Their wives away.
Exactly. What did I call the list? These are the righteous. These are the ones who did wrong and corrected it. There's going to be a second list that is not given to us of those who did wrong and did not correct it. Maybe they died, maybe they're exiled, I don't know. There is also a list of those whose spouses are totally fine and just went through the lists and they're fine. No questions whatsoever. So adding all of that together, we have 111 men-ish who put away their foreign wife. And some of them are important individuals to note. From verse 25 through the end of the chapter, we have General Israel. But before that, we have verse 18. These are some of them: Maaseiah, Eleazar, Jarib, Gedaliah, some of the sons of Jeshua, the son of Jozadak, and his brothers. Who is Jeshua, the son of Jozadak? Yeah. He is the branch of God. He is the given one who will save. He is the one who stands before God with Satan the accuser accusing him, and God purifies him. He is their returned high priest. And his son, a couple of them actually, and some of his brothers are associated with this and had to put away their wives. They pledged themselves to put away their wives, and their guilt offering was a ram of the flock for their guilt. What does that mean, a ram of the flock for their guilt? Who remembers their Leviticus class? Oh, has it been 2 years? 3 years? I don't remember how long ago that was now. I think it might be 3 or 4. Anyways, what is a guilt offering? You guys can look in Leviticus 5 if you want. There's a couple of key things we can remember from Leviticus chapter 5. A guilt offering can only be done by a certain kind of individual. He is one who sins in a certain manner, unintentionally. Read Leviticus 5 and the following verses. Really read that whole beginning section talking about sacrifices. And the word unintentionally is everywhere. If you sin unintentionally, break the law unintentionally, do something unintentionally, unintentionally. Because if you do it intentionally, they die. Yes, good. Great question. That's very philosophical, but Jacob did. Okay? Well, I suppose he didn't get married unintentionally, but he didn't marry the one he thought. So, evidently it's possible. Unintentional is the word. Unintentional. So by them saying that these individuals offered a guilt offering, what are they saying about the men? They did this sin unintentionally. Or they did not realize it was wrong. Why is Ezra coming back to Jerusalem? You guys remember? What was his purpose? To bring the law. In fact, it's pretty specific. You start looking back there in Ezra chapter 7. His purpose is verse 10. Ezra had set his heart to study the law, to do it, and to teach its statutes and its rules in Israel. So, argument number one, they may not have known. Okay, we're not done. Argument number two, they may not have known this is an issue. Where have they been? They've been in exile for 150 years. Some of those people, I guarantee you, married Babylonians, married Persians, married Elamites, married whatever. I guarantee it. Because that's how people survive. And now they come back. There's an issue. What do you want, Clay? Esther? Yes. Great answer there. Okay. Last comment?
At the mother to see if they were true Israelites. And what about all these women that married foreign husbands? What about their children? Are they Israel?
They are probably not in Israel anymore. The woman leaves. So she left and went to them. But their wives came to the Jews. So, she's gone. Yeah, she's gone. Okay, last couple of comments. Verse 23 talks about the Levites, the gatekeepers, and the singers who had to. Not very many of them. And then verse 25 on through the end gives the rest of them. Verse 44, all these had married foreign women, and some of the women had even borne children. The implication is there is not many children, but there are some, because of the phrase had even. And that's there in the Hebrew as well, this way of speaking. I don't know what that's called. Last comment is verse 18, when talking about the priests, these individuals who put away their foreign wives have to stop being priests because no priest can continue to function connected to divorce. So they also lose their status as a result of this. Okay, we're done. 2 weeks we're doing Nehemiah. Apologize to Marisa for me.